Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I want to see that potential rematch. If we get to see it, that'd be great. But if not, I mean, Mendez is the man to beat. I think behind Aldo, honestly, and the line is too steep. It's a little bit ridiculous. I think that Elkins is definitely going to show up and fight. He's going to do his best. You never know. I mean, in this sport, anything can happen. I think you got to be kind of crazy right now to lay that price straight on Mendez. But there's going to be so many people putting him in a parlay. So I understand. For me, it's another one of those situations. If you're betting it straight, it's dog or pass. But it's more pass for me then. I mean, because I do think Mendez is going to come through.
I think you're probably right, and we'll go with that, and we'll move on to the main card, which is going to be televised on Fox on Saturday night, and that starts out with a very intriguing fight, as most of these are. I mean, we seem to keep saying that, but I really love this one especially. Matt Brown and Jordan Maine. Maine just looked like a killer in his last UFC fight, and we all know the track record of immortal Matt Brown.
Yeah, exactly. This is an interesting fight. Like I said, this is why I'm looking forward to this card so much because compared to some of the other ones, I mean, from top to bottom, all these fights are intriguing. All these fights are fairly competitive. I know there's a couple steep favorites there, but overall, I mean, these fights are, like I said, very competitive, and we're not sure exactly how everything's going to play out. And we forgot to mention also it's Strikeforce basically versus UFC, so that makes it that much more intriguing. But going back to this fight, I opened Mean almost a 3-1 favorite, and it quite wasn't enough because right now the line's sitting at 3.5-1, so the betting public coming in that way as well. I do think it's kind of a bad matchup for Brown, though. I think that Jordan just has him covered basically in every area. I think Matt Brown is definitely dangerous with his offensive sub game. His striking's decent as well. So he's dangerous in all aspects. His wrestling's even a little bit underrated, but I don't think it's going to be enough in any area to beat Jordan Maine in this fight. I think he's got a lot of momentum coming into this fight. And if anything, I mean, out of prospects that you've been hearing about for a while, I have seen the improvement in Jordan Maine. I mean, he's definitely training. He's doing things right to improve his overall game because he keeps on improving with every fight. His takedown defense gets better. His grappling gets better. His striking is really getting to the point where it's arguably towards the top of the welterweight division already. I mean, so it's an outstanding matchup, I think, for Jordan Mean to win. Again, it's kind of hard to bet though at 3.5-1 against Matt Brown. He's been on an impressive roll, always underestimated as well, it seems like, and he's a tough guy. So it should be a great fight, but I have to lean towards Mean, honestly.
Yeah, and see, I'm going to make the same case for Matt Brown that you just did for Jordan Mean, in that I believe he is an always improving fighter. I mean, he was at one point very middle of the road. He was 11-10 at UFC 123 when he got choked out by Brian Foster, but ever since then he's reinvented himself. 5 out of 6 and a lot of KOs and TKOs in there, and he's just looked overall like a much more impressive fighter than the guy that everybody used to think was their ticket to punch to get an easy win in that weight class. And I don't think you can say that about Brown anymore, even if you rate Jordan Mean very highly. And I do. This is not a cakewalk fight for him.
No, it is. I mean, Matt Brown's going to show up to fight, but the problem with him is, though, his cardio is kind of a question mark. I mean, he goes 3 rounds, that's not a question, but he does fade a lot. So after the first round and round 2 and round 3, he's a different fighter. He's not quite the same as Sharp. His cardio definitely needs to be on par here if he wants to really compete with Maine, because if not, I mean, even if it is competitive in round 1, I think that Jordan's going to pull away in round 2 and round 3 and really make it clear, if not stop Brown. And again, Brown's another one of these guys that's hard to stop, so that's impressive to say. But look what he did with Miller. Almost the same situation. Dan Miller was never stopped before, and he did away with him in round 1. So impressive. And Mean has that kind of stand-up game that he can be that effective, I think.
I'm certainly not disputing it. I expect big things from Mean to come, both in this fight and in the future in welterweight. And guys that have a big future at lightweight are Nate Diaz and Josh Thomson. Another fight that is going to definitely shake up rankings because, going into this fight, Nate Diaz is ranked number 4. So if he took a loss here, it would really hurt.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good possibility he's going to take a loss here in this fight because, again, the way they match up, I opened Diaz around minus 170. The betting public popped it up to over 200. It's sitting around 200 right now, so 2-1 for Diaz. And just by stylistic matchups, again, if we talk about it, it's not a great matchup for Diaz. Both these guys are primarily grapplers. Well, I shouldn't say that because Diaz likes to stand and bang, of course, as well. He's got decent boxing like his brother. But, I mean, as far as grappling goes, they're definitely very skilled on the ground. But the problem here is wrestling for Diaz. I mean, he does get put on his back in his fight with Ben Henderson. Ben Henderson managed to control him. I'm not saying that Josh Thompson's physically as strong as Ben Henderson, but he's capable, again, of getting the takedowns, I think, and surviving. In most cases, if you take Nate Diaz down, If he is going against a solid wrestler, your caution there would be Diaz could sub him. He's so slick off his back. Now, Ben Henderson obviously has tremendous sub defense, so that wasn't as much of a concern. But that's almost the same thing here with Josh Thomson. Josh Thompson's likely not going to get caught in any submission by Diaz, where other fighters might, tend to make a mistake here and there and get caught. I don't think you're going to have to worry about that with Thompson. So his top control should be enough to win him this fight. On the feet, you got to favor Diaz's boxing, but Thompson's no slouch on the feet either. I mean, obviously, both these guys are extremely well-rounded, but the problem with Diaz is his wrestling. And I think Thomson, man, right now, plus 170 with the wrestling advantage, I think you got to take a stab at the dog, honestly, because I think it's a lot closer and competitive than the line indicates right now.
I think you're right about that. And Thompson should definitely not be disregarded. For people who don't know Strikeforce, were never following it when he was a champion there. He lost the title to GIlbert Melendez, and GIlbert Melendez is pretty much the only person he couldn't beat. And that plays a big role in the main event that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But before that, we've got number 3 and number 6 ranked heavyweights, Daniel Cormier and Frank Mir, and they're probably going to have a slobber knocker of a fight.
Well, the odds kind of are a little high, I think, for Frank Mir, considering who Frank Mir is at this point. So Daniel Cormier minus 400 was my opener, plus 300 on Mir, and it's actually climbing up a little bit more. I'm sure we're going to see it drop back down because of respect factor. A lot of fans are going to take a stab at the plus 300 or above on Frank Mir, especially by fight day, because it's another one of these lines. It's kind of hard to lay the juice on something that steep, especially against Frank Mir, but man, it's almost justified because I think, again, matchup-wise, it's a bad matchup for Frank Mir. I don't think he's going to be able to get this fight to the floor. I think Daniel Cormier's striking, he might not be as technical as Frank Mir at times, but his speed and his power is going to be more effective. So I think he can knock Frank Mir out, whereas Frank Mir is going to probably have a little bit more trouble catching Daniel Cormier. I think he should maybe concentrate on pinning him up against the cage, slowing the fight down, and trying to grind as much of Cormier out as he can, but it's going to be hard to do. So that's why you're seeing the line so steep. I mean, Cormier is, even though he doesn't have that experience that Mir does going into this fight, I mean, look what he's done. I mean, the last couple of years, the guy's really come on strong, and his game is just tremendous. I mean, he's definitely one of the top heavyweights in the world, no doubt.
Yeah, and he came into mixed martial arts with a lot of raw, untapped talent as an Olympic-level wrestler, and we've just seen an amazing development of that over the last couple of years as he's refined it and added striking and ground defense to his game. And he's looking, the fact that the voters in the UFC rankings panel put him number 3 just shows you how much esteem he has basically coming into UFC. Still, he's proven himself in Strikeforce, but now he's got to prove himself all over again. But I'd say that the people voting for him are the same as the people betting on him. They believe that he can either knock out Mir or he can take him to the ground whenever he wants.
Yeah, exactly. Now on the ground, he's going to have to be cautious because Mir definitely is one of the best grapplers in the history of MMA in the heavyweight division, no doubt. So he's got to be cautious there. But I think no matter where the fight takes place, Cormier probably shouldn't get caught. So yeah, I think he's going to finish. You know what the problem with Mir is too? When pressure starts getting put on, he tends to fold. I've said it before in other interviews, and I mean it. I mean that's what happened against JDS. I think a lot of fights he just ends up tending to fold if things aren't going his way. And that's not a guy you typically want to bet on. You want to avoid stuff like that as far as betting goes. He could be doing well in a fight and then all of a sudden, I don't know, it's not good at all. And that bothers me as far as Frank Mir goes.
I will accept that definition, but I do give him a lot of respect as a multiple-time former champion, and the guys that he's beaten are, among a who's who of heavyweights, everybody from Big Nog to Brock Lesnar, so you can't ever take that away from Frank Mir. I mean, he doesn't always show up for every fight, but the fights he shows up for, he's won some pretty big ones.
No doubt, and I'm not trying to disrespect the guy for sure. He deserves the respect that you just gave him. I think you're exactly right. And when he shows up, I mean, he is a talented guy, no doubt about it.
Yep, but 2 guys that definitely aren't going to fade. In fact, may go the full 25 minutes, not stopping for a single second, are GIlbert Melendez and Benson Henderson. I can't see any way this fight just isn't nonstop energy from start to finish.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it is going to go 5 rounds, and it's going to be a competitive battle for all 5 rounds. I mean, it's going to go back and forth everywhere. I think every aspect of MMA is going to be shown in this fight, which is going to be good because these guys do come to fight. They don't fade, like you said. Typically, they don't fade too much. So it's going to be a war. Now, the betting line, I opened it Ben Henderson minus 2-1. It was about 205 or so. Now it's sitting at 3-1 for Ben Henderson. Now, I thought when I opened the line initially, line was a little bit too high because on paper you have to give the slight edge to Ben Henderson. But again, the way these guys match up, Melendez is actually a pretty tough matchup for Henderson. I mean, Henderson physically, he's looked tremendous. I mean, he's bullied pretty much everybody around. His wrestling has been superior to most fighters in the UFC for sure. But I think even though Melendez at times in the past has shown a little bit of weakness, he's been taken down in his fights. Ishida was able to out wrestle him back in Japan, even though the rematch Melendez kind of put an end to that pretty quick. And again, Thomson had some success in that department as well. But in those fights, I think Melendez, believe it or not, kind of didn't show up and didn't take those fights as serious. That's a problem with some of these fighters. I think motivation plays a big factor in their performance at times. So a lot of people, because of Melendez's performance against Josh Thomson in his last bout, because it was so close, the stock basically dropped on Melendez. They're thinking, oh man, he's overrated. I don't think that's the case. I mean, he beat him in the second fight. You know, they had 3 fights. Obviously, everybody that's listening probably pretty much knows that. I'm talking about Thomson and Melendez, the trilogy there. He kind of underestimated him in the first fight. Thomson looked great. He won the fight. In the second fight, Melendez looked like a completely different fighter. He deserved to win the fight. He won the fight. And the third fight didn't have that motivation factor possibly going into that fight. He lost the fight. Now, that being said, he's going to be motivated to get the UFC title shot against Ben Henderson, especially after watching his teammate just get beat by Ben Henderson as well. That, you know, he's kind of got an insight of what Ben Henderson's all about. I mean, firsthand, he was in his corner. So I think that helps him as well. I think the wrestling aspect that everybody thinks Ben Henderson's going to have such a huge advantage with it isn't going to be as strong, because I think Melendez is going to be hard to take down. And on the feet, he's actually the better striker. He's got the better hands. So I think that Gil's going to end up stuffing a lot of the takedowns and probably outworking Henderson and get a decision here. So at plus 200, sick. We got to take a stab at Melendez, because it's going to be a competitive fight either way. Even if you lose a decision by a close decision, there's just way too much value at plus 200. The line should be a lot closer.
I agree. And just to clarify something you said for anybody that might be confused listening, he didn't win the decision. He won one of the judges in that decision, but GIlbert Melendez won that fight is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry if I confused people out there. Yeah, definitely. Melendez won the last fight, but a lot of people thought it was a controversial decision, and possibly Thomson deserved the fight.